The European Union has announced that it is suspending a multi-million-dollar conservation project in Western Kenya, citing abuses against local tribesmen, including the reported killing of a man. Now, the government deployed additional rangers to the Embutute forest early January to evict members of the Sengwer community from their ancestral land in order to preserve forest cover. The community continues to resist resettlement efforts. Lenny Ruvaga reports from Eldoret in Western Kenya.
78-year-old Thomas Chelimo is from the Sengwer community, which resides in Eldoret. Chelimo and his wife Pauline have called the Embutute forest home all their lives. However, on January 1st, their home, together with others, was razed to the ground. The Kenya Forest Service says it is evicting residents out of the forest as part of conservation efforts. The forest is a critical water supply area. Chelimo says that the forced eviction by the government agency will render them homeless and landless.
I was born and raised here. My father and his father were all born and raised here too. This is the only place we know and call home. There's nowhere else for us to go. My children and great-grandchildren all ran away in fear of the evictions, and I'm still looking for a way to bring my entire family together again.
Leah Torre-Teach and her husband Abraham say that although the government initiated a compensation program about 3 years ago, where resident families were given $4,000 each to relocate, genuine community members did not get any money at all.
We've heard that the government gave out compensation to our community members, but we haven't received any yet. There have been claims that members of the community received payment, but this is not the case, and that's why we are still here in the forest.
The European Union, EU, has suspended a $35 million 6-year program to protect the ecosystem in the area following reports of rangers using force on the local population. Roslyn Amadi, an international law expert and Kenya's former chief state counsel, says that the Kenyan constitution protects the rights of the Sengwer.
There is this dichotomy that if they are there, then they are destroying the environment. And I think that is what has happened, and that is the conflict that we are having. So whereas you have the right to preserve the environment for present and future generation, you also have the issue of development, and you also have the cultural rights of the people.
Naomi Baraza from Amnesty International says that the eviction of the minority community from their indigenous home is a violation of their fundamental right to shelter.
Kenya as a state is going against regional, international and local treaties that safeguard human rights, because the Sengwer issue, the rights of the indigenous people, rights to housing are anchored in our constitution, international law that Kenya is a treaty to. So it's purely a human rights issue. It also affects the lives of the people.
The Kenyan government has not responded to VOA's requests for comment on the evictions. But for Thomas Chelimo and others from the Sengwer community, the evictions mean an uncertain future. Lenny Ruvaga for VOA News, Embutute Forest.
Making hay while the sun shines is what Niger State government is doing. It is making plans to provide resettlement shelters where residents of flood-prone areas can relocate to during the rainy season, which is just around the corner. The state authorities hope to forestall the impact of floods on its residents rather than race against time when the rains come. Here's that story.
Residents of Niger State can testify firsthand to the sheer power of water, especially after hours of torrential rainfall last year. Some of the most dramatic scenes played out in places like Suleja, where residents had to battle the tide to stay alive, while some were not fortunate to escape the havoc caused by floods in the state. With the rains approaching, coastal states are typically more at risk. Kaiso community, a small settlement situated in Mokwa local government area of Niger State, along the river Niger, is one such community. Predominantly an agrarian one, Perennial flooding affects their sources of livelihood and in some cases grinds life as they know it to a halt.
If you come to this community when there is flood, you won't be able to see any building, mind you. Then the economic impact is much, much more than what people thought. The only thing they can do for us is relocation to an upper land.
Understandably, they're not looking forward to a repeat of history and have made pleas to the government to relocate their community ahead of the rainy season, while some of them fear their community may cease to be habitable in the near future.
Whenever we enter a new year, just like January, we used to think ahead of the next rainy season, because when we start suffering a lot of we are with tension all the time.
However, help is on the way for them as the state government makes plans for resettlement of residents of flood-prone communities during the rainy season. The acting governor says the land will be ready in a few weeks, after which construction will commence immediately.
The place, the community called Chegama, we have agreed with the owner of the land, those communities, and we have costed the cost implication, and also the resettlement amount was being approved by His Excellency. So what remains is for the government to disburse the money to the community. Then they can now start the implementation process of the clearing of that land, and then looking at how they will be able to award the contract for the starter for the structures of that particular community.
The Niger state government may well be taking proactive measures to reduce the impact of flood disaster on the population, but they admit that the task of making adequate provision for affected communities is beyond their financial capacity. They seek partnership with the federal government and support in terms of intervention to better prepare for the rains.
It's time now for a short break, but we'd like to remind you to visit our website, channelstv.com, for news and other programming around the clock. You can find us on youtube.com/channelsweb. Still to come, remembering a South African jazz legend, Hugh Masekela, the anti-apartheid activist, dies at the age of 78. That story after the break.